game or whatever show you want to call it, but it's players that have the most to prove this coming off season. I'm going to go first. I think that this list for me has a couple players in mind. I think for you, you probably have a couple as well. Let me start with my first guy. The first guy I have, and you're going to be surprised by this, maybe, is I'm going to go with Karl Anthony Towns as one of my guys.
Let's hear.
To
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you at all.
And let me just make sure I move it so you guys can see it. Perfect. All right. So the reason why I have Karl Anthony Towns as kind of my most approved this season is because when we think about the Timberwolves at this point in the way that everything's gone, they made this huge acquisition to bring in Rudy Gobert. A lot of people are starting to think, this could be a finals contender team. I'm sure we've talked about it before on this channel previously. But when we look at the stats from Karl Anthony Towns, he's consistently giving you about 24 to 26 points per game. Now, the question becomes, with both Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns kind of being both the similar positions, where you're probably going to have to move Cat to the 4 and kind of have Rudy Gobert planted down low. The reason why I say that this is a prove-it year for him is because we know by this point in his career that he's a number 2. We know that this is probably going to be Anthony Edwards' team. I think no one could argue with that. And so when I think about it from that perspective of, okay, this is now Anthony Edwards' team. He needs to take over for this team in order to get them to that next step. The reason why I think Karl Anthony Towns is under more pressure is because he's been there the longest, and for a guy that's been the number 1 option in Minnesota for so long, I want to see if he can coexist with those 3 guys, and especially with Anthony Edwards being now the number 1 or the more featured guy in the offense, and maybe more so in the set plays and the out of bounds and timeouts and things like that. So what do you think about that one, Pete? Most proved, Karl Anthony Towns?
I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, I've always been much more critical of Cat than you. I mean, we've long debated Karl Anthony Towns on this channel. There is a lineage of our disagreements about this guy as a player, and I don't disagree with you at all. Like, I really don't. Like, this dude definitely has to prove it this year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, it was clear in the middle of last season that Anthony Edwards is the guy. Like, there's no question. If anybody disagrees, I just don't think you watched the Timberwolves. Anthony Edwards is better than Karl Anthony Towns is right now already. The thing with Cat that I can never get over is his poor decision making. Like, he will just get into these modes when it's a big game, if it's crunch time in a big game, where he is making these choices that you have to just shake your head at. And it happened a bunch of times against the Grizzlies in the playoffs last season. And I mean, honestly, they could have won that series. They could have had a huge upset and won that series. And due to some really horrific decision-making by Cat and D'Angelo Russell, to be fair, they didn't end up winning. Like, it's that simple. So I think a lot of people would probably disagree with us and say if anybody needs to prove it on this team, it's probably Rudy Gobert. Like, they just gave up this historic haul to get him. But I would argue, what you're getting with Rudy Gobert. You absolutely know. You know the limit on what he can give you offensively, and you know how great of a defender he is. So the real question is, how is Cat going to adapt? And realistically, I think I've said this on this channel before. We've probably discussed this before. Cat is amazing in the league right now, if he actually fits into that mold. Because the thing with Cat is he's never been an interior defender the way you'd hope he is. He's never capitalized on his athleticism and his size down low in terms of defense. So this should be, and this is why I was so high on that trade right when it happened. I mean, minus how much they gave up for Rudy, I think the fit is perfect for the team.
Yeah.
If Cat adapts and works into his strengths with Gobert masking some of his deficiencies. So I totally agree with you. I mean, this team can go far as its top 2 players, takes them. Or I guess you'd say they're top 3 now with Rudy. So I think a lot of that hinges on Karl Anthony Towns, because at the end of the day, Anthony Edwards is 20 years old. Nobody's going to fault him if the season comes up short. I don't think. And I think if people do, it's like, what are you talking about? He's probably going to be in the league for 20 more years after this. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Cat is the guy. He needs to prove it this year.
Yeah. I think so too, and I think as well, along with Cat, I would probably have to say, probably have to put D'Lo in that conversation as well. I think D'Lo
Sure.
definitely needs to be talked about as a person who, again, we don't, this is what, his third or fourth team at this point of his career,
Fourth, I
and
think. Or no,
four
no, 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 no. It's his third, right?
his third. I just think
Oh,
like
no,
with
no,
the
no. No, it's his fourth. He started with the Lakers. I'm sorry. I always forget he was on the Lakers for a season or two.
and so
Because didn't
when
he?
yeah,
No, never mind. Keep going.
he went Lakers, I think then he went what? Brooklyn
Lakers. Oh, maybe it is three. Lakers, Brooklyn, Timberwolves,
and Golden State. He had that one stint in
and
Golden
Golden
State.
State. That's what it was. Golden State. Okay, I thought there was a team in between. I'm,
And
I'm with
so
it now.
I think like you do need a prove a year from him as well because again, you now have a core four, maybe not the core that maybe you want or think that is good, but at the same time, you just want to make sure that you understand when it comes to those guys that you want like I think for me like D'Angelo Russell needs a lot to prove this year because I think that it's been frustrating to kind of watch his career path because I think that Brooklyn was probably the right fit for him. You could clearly see that he was having an exciting time. He was fun. And then as soon as they traded him to Golden State, I feel like that's where I feel like the switch went off for D'Angelo Russell. And I felt like maybe you ever have one of those players or you ever think about some of those players, Pete, when they have a great fit somewhere and then they get traded and then they just can never find that run of form again.
Oh, sure. I mean, we've seen it in recent history for sure. I think like a good example, but also kind of a bad one just because injuries is Oladipo, right? He has never been the same guy as he was that couple season stretch in
Mm-hmm.
Indiana, but that has to do with injuries. The thing with D'Lo, and this is why I think it's much more on Cat. I think we kind of understand that D'Lo probably is never going to be that guy in the NBA at this point, because
Mm-hmm.
even at his best stretch with Brooklyn, he was still pretty inefficient. And I
Yeah.
say this as somebody who was going hard to get him to come to the Knicks that offseason, where he was a free agent. So it's not necessarily like I'm just saying this dude's terrible. That's not really it, but he kind of is who he is at this point. I don't know if it's as much on him, but it'll be interesting to see because he really needs to adapt. If he's taking those ugly, like crazy long 3-pointers that he has no business taking in any game, let alone in the playoffs,
Mm-hmm.
I it's pretty reminiscent of Westbrook, a little bit. Not necessarily like his play style, but just the decision making and not
Yeah.
being able to adapt to what the team needs from him.
Exactly. And let us know in the comment section down below if you feel that Karl Anthony Towns is a player that needs to prove it this year. Again, there's a lot of conversation when it comes to the Timberwolves, and I think that obviously Karl Anthony Towns needs to be talked about in that conversation because has to be the year where it feels like the Timberwolves have all the pieces. They feel like they're ready to attack, and so we'll see where it goes in the near future. Really quick before we go on to our next person, Russ, you said why do they play at Seattle Pacific? They actually used to play at Rainier Beach. This pro-am used to be at Rainier Beach back when Jamal started it. But since it's gotten more popular and there's more notoriety, they obviously had to upgrade the venue. And I believe Jamal has a relationship with the Seattle Pacific coach, or at least someone from Seattle Pacific. So that's why they do it there instead of Rainier Beach. Because if it was any other, I think if it was to stay the way that it was back then they would have just had it be at Rainier Beach. Let's see here. Let's move on to the next person. All right, Pete, do you have anybody? I was going to steal the thunder, but do you have
Yeah.
anybody? Who you got?
I do indeed. I do indeed. Tyrese Cat overhyped. I mean, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you, Tyrese. Not one bit. My second one, I think this is honestly the most obvious one of all. I think there's two that are super duper obvious. They're top 15 players in the NBA. But mine, the one I'm going to start with is Anthony Davis. I think Anthony Davis has
Anthony
one of the biggest
Davis.
prove it years we've seen from. I think this is like a top 10 prove it year from a top 15 player, maybe ever. Like at the stage of his career that he's in right now, there is no explanation why Anthony Davis can not only not stay on the court, but why he's not a top 10 player, why he hasn't taken the mantle from LeBron James. There's no good explanation other than he needs to prove that he's that guy. You know, I mean, we've been sold that he's that dude forever, and we've seen him for stretches be one of the best players in the league. And the thing I think, and this is, you know, going into that Seattle Pro-Am that's going on, this Jamal Crawford Pro-Am, LeBron James is flying into Seattle just to play in this game. Where's Anthony Davis at any of these functions? Where's Anthony Davis's off season? Where's he playing? You know what I'm saying? Like we see old man LeBron is out here putting in the work, getting better every day, trying to still stay on, you know, the top of his game, and Anthony Davis is nowhere to be seen. You know what I mean? This
Yeah.
is a dude that could not stay on the court last year. Couldn't stay on the court the year before either, or many of the years in the, you know, before that. So, man, I would be very frustrated if I was a Lakers fan with Anthony Davis. I think he's too good to not play as much as he does and to not impact this team winning as much as he should. So, if I'm LeBron James, if I'm the Lakers, that's who I'm looking at. You know, I know that they still have Russell Westbrook on the team, but you know what it is with Westbrook. He is not going to change anything whether he's there or not. He doesn't change anything, right? The only guy on this team besides LeBron that can change anything about their destiny, about their success, what this team is going to be is Anthony Davis. It really is. So, is it fair necessarily to say, like, where is he and why is he not going to these Pro-Am games? That's not really necessarily the whole thing, because really, does it matter if he goes to these games and puts up 60 points? Not really. But is he going to come back healthier? Is he going to come back locked in? Is he going to be ready to be the leader of a team that has a 40-year-old aging superstar on the team? And I don't think he is, man. I don't think Anthony Davis is that guy.
He's not that guy, pal?
Just don't think he is. But
Ooh.
I think he wants the perception that he is, and I think there's a lot of people who think he is. So I would argue this is a huge prove-it year for Anthony Davis.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. Really quick, I'll just read some of these comments before I speak. Where does Seattle U play? They play at their own gym, and then they also play at Climate Pledge when it's a bigger game. Tyrese said Anthony Davis not a generational talent. Russ, you also said Anthony Davis is in the PT gym. Tyrese, you also said trade AD and picks for KD to Lakers should do it. Here's what I will
trade AD straight up for KD. No picks. They don't need any picks.
Here's what I will say about AD. And again, I talked about it on my show, I think 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's been conversations. Chris Haynes, obviously great NBA inside reporter. I watched him on the Some Dude Show, which is a podcast that his name is Cuffs. He's a trainer out in North Carolina that also, you know, has pretty good rapport with some of the players. But Chris Haynes on his show talked about how the conversation he had with LeBron James, you know, it was the story that we kind of made fun of a little bit where they huddled together and we didn't know what it meant. He talked about how him and I should say LeBron James and Ham, Darvin Ham.
Yeah.
Darvin Ham, they talked over the phone or they talked with each other. And basically the insurances is the reason why I think LeBron James signed the contract too, is that he made promises, as Coach Ham did, to LeBron that Anthony Davis was going to be the focal point of the offense. He was saying, like, we need to go through Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis has to be the number one option. And you know, kind of going back to your points about, you know, his health and his history. Obviously, we look at it right now. The last time he's even played remotely 75 games was back in the 2017-18 season when he was a Pelican. And obviously they won the championship. I believe it was that 1920 season, I believe.
1920, yeah.
I
mean, that's unacceptable, to be straight up with you. That's unacceptable. If you get paid as much as Anthony Davis does, you're as good as he is.
I think that this is going to be a situation where I think Anthony Davis does silence the haters a little bit, in my opinion. I know I had him as my MVP last season. I know that, you know, there should be no reason as to why I'm picking Anthony Davis to be, you know, anywhere near where he was, at least in that, you know, COVID year season. But what I think I appreciate the most about Anthony Davis is that I've been watching a little bit of the film. I've been seeing some footages out there of him working on his game, and I think he is going to do a lot better. The reason I think that this is going to be a better year for him is because I think that this is going to be the first year in a long time where he gets to that kind of serious level of, okay, I'm finally going to take care of my body the way I need to. Because I think,
Mhm.
you even said it yourself, Pete, like, how can we trust this guy if he hasn't been playing so much, if he hasn't been taking care of his body the way that he needs to be out there? But I think I see it from him this year, man. Maybe I could be wrong, and maybe obviously, you should look at the history to see like whether or not someone has been uh living up to those words that you talk about. But I think that with the way that the Lakers, it feels like there's some sort of renewal energy. I can't explain it in terms of like numbers and stats, but it seems like there's this rehyped energy, and it might just be because LeBron re-signed there, and that's really it. I do think that you could see LeBron James and Anthony Davis have a revival year, and I think that they could do some great things. Again, if they're both playing together, if they're both healthy, and even with the Westbrook, the way that he plays, I still think you can make the playoffs.
Does he look any skinnier?
He does.
Okay, because that was a big thing last season. I felt like he made a pretty poor choice body wise. He got kind of buff last season coming into the year, and he just looked way too heavy for how big he is. That's a real thing, especially if you're like a fluid athlete, the way that AD is, like when he's actually healthy. He was just carrying way too much weight last season, and I mean, I think that's a big reason why he just kept being injured constantly. And
Hmm.
if he is going into it, because that's one thing I don't think like people look back on, one of probably the 5 to 7 greatest players of all time, Tim Duncan, right? Tim Duncan
Hmm.
was never like super big for how huge of a guy he was. He kind of
Hmm.
stayed in the same body size most of his career,
Yeah.
and as a result, he was relatively healthy for,
Hmm.
the bulk of his really long and successful NBA career. So the only reason I go so hard on Anthony Davis and the reason I think he is the biggest prove it is because I think he's so incredibly talented when he's healthy. And he's
Hmm.
such an important player in the league in terms of his skill set and his size and what he's done in terms of kind of revolutionizing what a big man can be in this, 3-point shooting league. He is an important player. And really, whether or not you think he's a generational talent, when he is fully healthy and engaged on the basketball court in the NBA, he is one of the 10 best players in the league, full stop. Like, it's not a question. He's one of those guys. He's incredibly talented. So
Hmm.
I say prove it just because you cannot continue. Like, people might think I'm just being overly a stan for saying something like this, but LeBron, whether you think this is real or not, this is real. LeBron has put a ton of trust, effort, and
Hmm.
investment of his own professional career into Anthony Davis as a player, right?
Yeah.
He did not do all of that so he could still be the main guy at 40. He didn't
Yeah.
do that. He invested that time and effort into Anthony Davis because he believed Anthony Davis could be the guy that
Hmm.
he could be the backup to eventually.
Yeah.
And we've not seen that. We haven't seen that at all, other than in the bubble a little bit. That was like a brief moment. And those were perfect circumstances for a guy like Anthony Davis. So I think he's the number one prove it. Can I give you my second prove it and then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can go on for a
Yeah.
couple?
Go ahead.
I'm gonna say Kevin Durant is number three.
Kevin Durant.
And I would say for me, he's number two, prove it. And the reason I would say prove it is um, it's less on the court than Anthony Davis is, but it is still on the court. And I think he needs to prove he's worth all of this mess and distraction he's created for the teams he's been a part of. You know, like we need to see him stay healthy on the court. We need to
Hmm.
see him stay engaged on the court. And realistically, we need to see him stay invested in the team he plays for. Whether that's the Brooklyn Nets, whether that's another team he ends up going to,
Hmm.
this is a huge year for.
Philly.
And maybe Philly. This is a huge year, and I can't help but kind of grimace because I'm going to use a word that the old crusty media, as you like to call them, use a lot. But this is a crazy big year for the legacy of Kevin Durant. You know, if this is a year where he goes out and he just continues to kind of be this distraction and kind of a messy player for the teams he's involved with, that's a huge hit. That's a huge hit. Whether he thinks it is or not, it's a huge hit because the only really truly
Hmm.
successful years that this man has had in terms of winning has been with Steph Curry. and been with the Golden State Warriors and their infrastructure and the coaching and all the other great players that that Golden State team had. So if you want to have the legacy as one of the best players in
Mm-hmm.
NBA history, which I think a lot of people think he is obviously one of the best players ever, you need to go out there and prove that you're not just in it only for yourself and in it for, all these things that have been major distractions to him
Yeah.
and his team. So what do you think about that? Do you think Kevin Durant is in a prove it year or no?
Um.
Because he doesn't like. Let me clarify one thing while you think of your answer. He doesn't need to prove he's a good player. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
He just needs to prove, like I said, that he is worth all of this hassle that he's created for everybody. Because there's a reason that nobody has just sent a bag for Kevin Durant yet. In any
Mm-hmm.
circumstance, if this dude is not such a travesty off the court in terms of what he's doing and saying, somebody would have gone and got him already. I am a full-on believer of that. There would have been somebody who sent everything they had to get this guy based on
Mm-hmm.
his talent alone. But people don't want to deal with the mess that is Kevin Durant, in my opinion, right now.
I would say in terms of, I feel like it is a bit of a prove it year if he does go back to Brooklyn. If he goes back to Brooklyn, I think it's a prove it year. And the reason why I say this is because when I think about Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and all the stuff that they have said in their previous tenure with the Brooklyn Nets, whether it's about the head coach, whether it's about the owner, the GM, the the area itself in Brooklyn, they continue to, again, the owner has given, those two guys the free reign to kind of do what they want. Not saying that, I guess the way to put it is like they basically got, kind of whatever they wanted, whether it's tickets for family, whether it's, family and entourage can come with them. And I think that, again, I do appreciate that from the Brooklyn Nets perspective of being that super open about it, and being able to kind of give, Kevin Durant what he wants. But at the same time, when I look at it, the reason why I think it would be a prove it year more so if he stayed in Brooklyn than any other reason is because he needs to prove it. If they do decide to get rid of Steve Nash, if they do decide to get rid of Sean Marks, they need to ball out on the court and prove why getting rid of those guys helps both Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant win a championship or get further in the playoffs. Again, this is now 2 years in a row where the Brooklyn Nets have been disappointing in the playoffs. Maybe the last year wasn't so much because of the not this previous year, but 2 years ago when they lost to Giannis and the
Yeah.
Bucks. Just because
Lots
I
of
think
injuries that year.
a lot of injuries, and I think Giannis and the Bucks were absolutely incredible that year. Um, but when I think about it, they really haven't done that much, right? When you think about what they've been able to do for their team. And for all the talk and all the stuff that Kevin Durant has kind of said that it's either me or the head coach, especially when Steve Nash was the guy that you wanted in the first place, Kevin Durant. I just think that it's one of those things where I can't get behind what Kevin Durant's really doing in that perspective and in that instant because again,
Yeah. I mean,
it's one of those things that when I think about it, how can you get behind, how can anybody, whether you're a fan of the Brooklyn Nets or not, be behind what Kevin Durant did or what he was able to do in Brooklyn?
I don't disagree with you at all. I mean, and that's kind of why I think he's number two. I think I don't disagree with you in terms of if he ends up staying with Brooklyn and they fire Sean Marks and they fire Steve Nash,
Mm-hmm.
it's an ultimate prove it year. Because if you come out there and it's still a mess, I mean, I don't know if anybody who is rational about the NBA really would blame Steve Nash and Sean Marks at this point, other
Mm-hmm.
than maybe him and Kyrie, right?
Yeah.
But if there is, and they come back and those dudes get fired and it's still a mess, there's no hiding anymore. There's no hiding
Yeah.
behind anybody to blame. So I can't disagree with you in terms of that would be the biggest one. But I think if any team goes out and, sends all of the things they have to get this dude, I don't I don't know if there's anybody else that's as big of a prove it in that scenario either. Like that's a huge prove it. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
still can't win, let's say it is the Lakers, right? Just hypothetically, it's the Lakers, they trade Anthony Davis and a pick, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they don't win the championship with LeBron James, Kevin Durant, and whoever else they put out on the court. I mean, people might blame LeBron, excuse me, but I think a lot of that would come down on KD. Like
Yeah.
a lot of it would come down on KD. So it's a huge prove it for him too, anywhere he goes.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. In terms of if he does go to a super team or that sort of
Yeah.
similar kind of caliber, it definitely would be a prove it year. Let us know in the comment section down below who else would be in that prove it year. Let us know in the live chat or in the comment section down below. And let's move on to my next guy. I think the next guy I have is Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine is in a prove it year. He signed that big long-term extension. He's been in the league now the same amount of times as Karl Anthony Towns, I believe. Started the league at 19. And you can clearly see that his career and progression has continued to grow since he moved to Chicago from Minnesota. And here's what I'll say about Zach LaVine. I think that last year was a little bit of a disappointment in terms of where the Bulls finished. I know a lot of people were excited about the Bulls, and that could be, again, potential to injuries as well. Caruso got hurt. Lonzo Ball got hurt. And then, of course, you had Vucevic and DeMar DeRozan, who, again, not bad players, but are kind of unproven, maybe more so Vucevic than DeRozan, a little bit more unproven in the playoffs. And so I think for the amount of money that you're paying him with the max contract for Zach LaVine last year and kind of moving forward, this has to be a time now where Zach LaVine has to carry this team at least to the semifinals or even the finals of the Eastern Conference. Because I think this team is too good, in my opinion, to have them not at least challenge in that perspective or in that range, in my opinion. Because again, the stats are there. The stats have always been there for Zach LaVine ever since, the 2018-19 season for Chicago. Now it's all about can they continue this momentum going forward with the team that they have around them and with the players that they've added through off seasons. This is the year for me.
Yeah, I can't necessarily disagree with you. I can't necessarily disagree. I don't know how much it's on him though. I mean, I'm interested to see. Like, I can't disagree 100% just because he did just get this big contract. He's been kind of posturing with the team in terms of if he was going to re-sign there or not in the first place, and then he ended up taking the big contract. So I do agree with you. I just think one thing for him that is in his benefit is how much he has improved in the last 2 seasons in particular. We've talked about it before in terms of how not into him I was as a player. And I think realistically, like, he took a dramatic leap defensively last offseason, the offseason before this one. So if he continues on like that would be the one thing I would say is interesting in terms of, is this maybe a Julius Randle situation? Did he really just go all in to get that extension? And is defense now going to be a afterthought again? I actually would be pretty surprised if that was the case. I think Zach LaVine is pretty locked in. So I think I think if he needs to prove it, I think he will, probably. I actually have kind of changed my tune on him quite a bit.
Do you think he makes it to the semifinal or final of the Eastern Conference?
I don't think they do, but I don't think that's his fault. I just don't think they're as good as some of the other top teams in the East. I don't know if that's his fault, though. I don't think he should be considered a one on a team. I really think a lot of their team's success is going to be dependent upon DeRozan at this point. And if he can be that, offensive, just kind of mid-range juggernaut that he was the last couple seasons, if he can continue that, I think this team has a good chance. But even at their healthiest, I just don't think they can compete with Boston or Milwaukee. I don't think they're that good.
Yeah, let's see here. Let's see the chat really quick. Sean says RJ Barrett in a prove it year, IMO.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with that, but I don't think it's a make or break prove it year necessarily. I think the one thing I would argue for RJ Barrett, and I'm definitely a homer, in terms of him in particular as a player for the Knicks. I have a very intense love for RJ Barrett as a New York Knicks basketball player. Like, he is one of the very few shining bright spots the team has had in the last 15 years, to be honest with you. The thing I would say for him is it's tough with the dysfunction around this team. And I don't necessarily think like all that is his fault, but I can't disagree. It is definitely a prove it year because if he is the third pick, the guy that came after Zion and John Morant, you would hope that this is where he starts to show he can be a two on a talented team.
Hmm.
Um, I'm just interested especially to see if he wrestles away the top spot on the team from Julius Randle because by all accounts he really should. He's better than Julius Randle is. Whether people think he is or not, he has the talent to be better than Julius Randle. So I believe he will. It's just all about expectations for this team. If the expectations are that this team is guaranteed a playoff spot or whatever,
Hmm.
I think the expectations are off completely. So if that's the make or break for RJ in terms of prove it, I would have to disagree just because I don't think the team around him is good enough to justify that level of expectations for him. But I don't disagree.
I guess the other question too from Sean is: think RJ Barrett wants the max, and would you give it to him?
I think he is going to get the max. And I think if there's any player that would take a little less than the max, I actually think he might. Like, I think he likes being in New York, but I think he's going to get the max. I don't even think it'll be a question. I think he's kind of one of the few beloved players the Knicks have even, remotely had in the last, 10 seasons. So
Hmm.
I think he'll get it. I think he'll get it.
But would you
Are
give it
you
to
ready?
him? Like, would
Would
you
I
give
give it to? I would give it to him. I think he's legitimately going to be an all NBA player in probably 2 or 3 seasons. I think he has
two or
all
three
the
seasons?
tools.
Okay.
I don't think he's there yet, which, some people might say, like, what is that if it's not, like Ja is already that guy. Zion, when he's healthy, is already that guy. That was never the thing with RJ. He had some serious holes in his game that he needed to work on, and I think that's one of the good things that he's had some experience in playoff games, but he's also had a few seasons to be on not good teams, so he could work on those things. But he is like legitimately a pretty well-rounded player in terms of the NBA. He's a really good defender when he's locked in. He, has range all over the court if he's, actually being consistent.
Hmm.
He's I don't know. I mean, I'm huge on RJ. I think that is one of the very few things where I would legitimately call myself a homer though and say that I can't necessarily talk about him unbiased. I'm not afraid to admit it. Like I am
Hmm.
probably more biased about him than any player in the league. But I think from everything I've seen, he has all of the tools to be an incredible wing player in the NBA. It's just about getting complementary players around him.
Yeah. Um.
I have a player. I got
Yep.
one
Yeah.
that
Go ahead.
I,
Go
I
ahead.
think is in a huge prove it year. For me, personally. People might disagree with this one too. I think Devin Booker. Big prove it year
Devin
for
Booker.
D Book. And I think his situation is not too different necessarily than Anthony Davis in the sense that Chris Paul has no business being the guy on the Phoenix Suns anymore. And I would argue that at the age he's at, if they really truly want to make it back to the finals and actually have a chance of winning,
Hmm.
Devin Booker needs to step it up. He really does. I think there was some moments last season where, some of my critiques of Devin Booker were, I would argue, they were kind of shown to be correct. His big game resume, I think, is a little questionable in terms of, the games he's been in. And I think
Hmm.
with Devin Booker, there was some big glaring moments of like, is this guy really like mentally superstar in terms of is he going to be locked in the biggest moments, right? And there was some memeable moments with Devin Booker where he made the mascot move in the back. I think that was last season, wasn't it? Or was that the season before? I think that was
Uh,
early last season,
Early
wasn't it?
last season, I think.
There was that, and then we had the Phoenix Suns get absolutely manhandled by Luka and the Dallas Mavericks in the playoffs. I
Hmm.
think that him talking trash to Luka and then getting just steamrolled by a one-man team basically in a big game that they had no business losing with the
Yeah.
talent and the resume that the Phoenix Suns did. A lot of that comes down to Devin Booker. And if you are Devin Booker, if you were the best player on the Phoenix Suns, a team that should be competing for the championship,
Hmm.
You cannot go out there and get beat by 50 points by a team with one All NBA player. You cannot do that. Just can't. And especially if Chris Paul is, 39 years old, DeAndre Ayton has question marks about how locked in he is. You are the guy for this team. And there's a lot of people who have, compared him to Kobe, compared him to all these players.
Yeah.
And me personally, I don't get it. I don't get it at this point in his career because I don't
Mhm.
see the same level of just, the same level of dog. I don't see that. I don't see that from Devin Booker. I see a guy that crumbles when the pressure comes onto him just because he is. Some people might disagree with this. I think Devin Booker is kind of a sensitive dude when it comes to not necessarily playing up to his top level, and
Interesting.
if it's not going his way,
Okay.
I think Devin Booker crumbles. I really do. And I hope he proves me wrong because I like Devin Booker. I think Devin Booker is incredibly talented. He has all the tools to be one of the best players in the league. And there are some people who think he already is. I do not think so. I do not think so. Because this team, no matter how much you like Devin Booker, no matter how much you like him, if you think they were in the finals in the 2020 season without Chris Paul, you're out of your mind. They would never have made it that far if it was not for Chris Paul. Chris Paul was the guy leading the team. He was the guy setting the tempo, setting the energy for the rest of the guys, and keeping them locked in. It was not Devin Booker. It just was not. And we saw last season what happens when they, somebody goes back at them really hard, and they got
Mhm.
absolutely stomped by Luka basically alone. So I would say Devin Booker is right up there for me. What do you think?
Uh, I think Devin Booker is an approve a year. I think that obviously last season there wasn't like a dip in his play, I would say. I mean, if we look at kind of the stats on here, again, there was some dip. But I think the reason why that is in terms of when we see it more so in the playoffs than anything else, and if we look at the playoff stats itself, this is really his only second year in the playoffs. It wasn't necessarily. I mean, again, I think that this to me was all due to the fact that I think the Phoenix Suns. I don't know. Obviously I think Devin Booker didn't get the ball as much, and he took a lot of interesting shots, but I don't know, man. I think that from Devin Booker's perspective, I think that he is a good player. But again, I never thought of him as a guy that's going to be a carrier of a franchise. Let's put it that way.
He gets paid like one, though.
He
People
does,
talk
but I
about him
mean,
like he
everyone
is.
does in this league, though.
I know everybody does, but I mean, this is my biggest thing, right? And whether this is fair to Devin Booker or not is up for debate, right? I think if you are constantly getting compared to Kobe as much as Devin Booker does, like that was a huge thing for a couple years there, right?
Hmm.
You cannot cave under pressure the way that Devin Booker does. Devin Booker is one of the biggest crumble under pressure players in the NBA right now, in my opinion. People talk about, we have Paul George, playoff P, stuff like that. Uh, Devin Booker, there is not many guys I see get that look of like, I don't know what to do, and
Hmm.
I'm cooked in this game. There's not many guys that get that look in their eyes more than Devin Booker does nowadays. So,
Hmm.
because somebody just asked in the chat, drunk just asked, who's better, Donovan Mitchell or Devin Booker? I think there's a lot of people who would say you're crazy if you think Donovan Mitchell is as good as Devin Booker. I don't think they're that far off of each other. I really, really don't. I think if you put Donovan Mitchell in Devin Booker's place on this Phoenix Suns team, the
Hmm.
results would be exactly the same. I really, truly do.
Interesting.
And and the problem with that is that Devin Booker is he should be better than Donovan Mitchell. He's bigger, he has more skills, he's a better defender technically. The problem is that mentally he caves. He caves every time they need him critically to come through. He caves. So I, I just have expectations for this guy that maybe other people think he already has reached.
Hmm.
It's the same thing with the Anthony Davis. It's the reason why I brought him up in terms of comparing him to Devin Booker in the situation. Like this should not be Chris Paul's team. Devin Booker should be the guy on the team. He really
Hmm.
should. And if this team truly is as good as they looked in the regular season last year, the only person that can carry them to the promised land down the stretch is Devin Booker. And I don't think he has it in him. I just don't.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean,
Devin Booker is an overhyped Danny Granger.
no, I think Devin Booker's better than Danny Granger. Again, Devin
I,
Booker's
I totally agree.
that was the point I was working with that question. Exchange D-Mitch for Booker, same result.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think so.
I don't feel that D Book is that much. I mean, he's by all accounts, we can look at his last, before Chris Paul came and kind of see the stats that he was putting up, right? He wasn't really putting up that crazy. I mean, he's putting up big numbers, but there was nothing really. What's the right word? It's just kind of empty calorie stats, right? But I don't know. I don't think that Devin Booker's as bad as people think. Again, I don't think that he's necessarily like a number one option. I never have,
Yep.
but I also don't think that he's terrible. And I probably would take D Book over Mitchell. And that's just
I would too. I need to make that clear. I would take Devin Booker over Donovan Mitchell. And this is where I guess maybe where we're on a little disconnect here, right? I think you think people think he's worse than he is. I think a lot of people think he's way better than he is. I hear people talk about Devin Booker like he's a top 5 player sometimes. I hear a lot of people talk about him like he's top 15. I don't think he's top 15 in the league. I truly don't. At that point, I think he's pretty interchangeable with Donovan Mitchell. Is Donovan Mitchell a top 15 player? I don't think so. I don't think he is either. So I think maybe that's our disconnect. I think I hear more people talk about him like he is that guy, and
Mhm.
I don't see it. I don't see it. If he got talked about the way you're talking about him, I think you're totally right. I think you're totally right. Devin Booker by no accounts should be looked at as a worse player than Donovan Mitchell. It's just the mentality, right? It's the mental part of the game when it comes down to these critical moments of game deciding play and how locked in you are and how much you truly believe in the guys around you and yourself to make these shots. I
Mhm.
just have never seen him be that guy in a game that actually matters. I've seen him do it a lot in games that don't matter.
Yeah. I mean that's you know what? I mean, you're right in that perspective, but again, what is Booker better than DeRozan?
Right now, I would take DeRozan over him. Long term, I would take Devin Booker over DeRozan, but right in this moment, I think you have a better chance of winning a big game with DeRozan.
I don't know, man. I think I would take Booker over DeRozan.
I mean, if you're talking like on the contracts they're on in terms of, a couple seasons ahead of right now, I would 100% take Devin Booker. It's just at this exact moment, I trust DeRozan to make a big shot much more than I trust Devin Booker.
Ah, I mean, that's tough. It's a tough
It's tough.
conversation, but
It shouldn't be though. It shouldn't be. You're comparing their age and how the skill set and how people talk about Devin Booker and have talked about him since he was 18. It shouldn't be a discussion, but that's kind of the problem with Devin Booker. It is a discussion. You might take 34-year-old DeRozan over him. Is DeRozan even 34? He might be 35.
I think he's like 32, 33, I think, DeRozan.
Look it up.
But again, I think that a lot of
He's
people
33.
33. Okay. I
Still.
do think
Yeah.
I don't know. You go ahead, Pete.
No, I just think if we hear the talk about this guy as much as we do, I
Mhm.
just expect more. I just truly do. I think anybody should. If and maybe it's just me being an old head to some extent. I don't want to hear you get compared to Kobe Bryant if you're asking mascots to move because they're distracting you. I don't want to hear you compared to Kobe Bryant if you trash talk a team and then get whooped by 55 points. I don't want to hear it. You're not Kobe. Under no circumstances would Kobe let those things happen, right? It It's just not, and that is that Devin Booker's fault. Again, I don't necessarily think it is. He's not out there saying I'm the next Kobe all the time. He's not. It's just the expectations of who this guy is and what people think he is in terms of winning that always gets to me. It's a huge question. Like, would you take? Here's a good one. Would you take Paul George or Devin Booker?
Paul George or Devin Booker?
I don't even think it's a question. I think you
Paul,
should take Paul George.
Paul George. Defensively, I would take Paul George. Just for the
even
defense.
Offensively, I'd take Paul George. I'd take him as an all-around player 10 times out of 10 over Devin Booker. And that is a guy who has also crumbled in the playoffs many times before. It's more, what are the expectations of Paul George? What does he bring to the team as a whole? And Devin Booker should be a better defender too. We haven't even talked about that. For his size and his length and athleticism, he should be a better defender than he's been in his career. He just isn't that guy.
Let's see. Drunk, you said it seems like every player who gets compared to Kobe fails every time. I'd rather have Paul
True,
George.
it's not fair. Yeah, it's not fair to be compared to Kobe, but just in terms of any player in the league that gets compared more to a guy like Kobe, it's Devin Booker is the guy I hear get compared all the time. And it's not reasonable because he's not even in the same stratosphere as a guy like Kobe when it comes down to it.
Well, let's talk about another disciple then. I think that this is going to be one that I talk about. I think another prove it year potentially could be from Jason Tatum.
This was my next one.
Tatum?
This was my next one. I agree. Yep.
I think the reason why I say it's a prove it year is because even though you could say that he was hurt, you could say that there has been some injuries and things like that, the question for Jason Tatum moving forward is, can you evolve your game beyond what people think of you as like a Devin Booker 2.0 in terms of the way that you went out in the finals is the way kind of how Booker went out in the finals in terms of some disappointments at times. Especially, we talk about the Devin Booker double team play where he didn't pass it in time. Jason Tatum, to me, not making the necessary passing. And I think either he broke the record or he must have led our team in turnover. I know for sure he led our team in turnovers in only in the playoffs, but also in the finals. The reason why I think this is a prove it year is because Jason Tatum is about to enter, his 24th. He's about to be 24 years old. It's about time that he continues the evolution of his game to the point where we saw in that Brooklyn Nets game where they were able to make these crazy plays. Like, we need to see that more from Jason Tatum. I love Jason Tatum. I think he's a great talent. But when push comes to shove, when everything is at its ultimate peak or point, Jason Tatum continues to play the same way that he has been playing each and every year. And again, as someone who loves the Celtics in terms of, of Tatum and Brown and kind of the potential that we have as a team, he does have some frustrating head-scratching moments. And that, to me, is the frustrating part about the Celtics and more so about Jason Tatum. And I hope that this year, even though he improved his stats this year, all across the board, maybe not three-point shot-wise, but everything else improved. He needs to continue building the rest of his game. He needs to become a passer. 4.4 assists, he's growing on that. I think if he is able to get rid of the ball so quick, then it would be I think that he would be a much different player, and I think he would be so much harder to guard if he was able to make those passes.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. This is a huge prove it year for Tatum. My reasons are a little different than yours, though. I think one thing that maybe is a little unfair, I think he was like legitimately a pretty good passer in the playoffs. Like in some stretches in the playoffs, that was about the only thing he could do effectively. He was drawing a ton of double teams and he would get these open looks for people. There's a reason they made it to the finals even when he was a little inconsistent in certain games. And that was just the playmaking, I think, was kind of, it actually looked like you would hope it looks all the time for Tatum.
Yeah.
Here's my thing with Tatum. I think he has all the tools to be a top 5 player in the league right now. Like he, by all accounts, has everything he needs to be one of those 5 guys. The problem with him is consistency. It's his number one, fatal crux of his game is consistency, because he will have games where you look at him and you see a guy that just does not look like Jason Tatum. Like there are games where he looks completely checked out, and it's not necessarily like he doesn't want to be there or want to play. And I don't mean it the same way I meant it about Booker. It's more
Mm-hmm.
he can get in his own head, I think, like where he will miss a few shots to start a game and it just never comes back. Whether it takes like 3 quarters,
Mm-hmm.
it sometimes takes a long time for him to get that rhythm back in terms of his shooting. So I think it's that. The reason I think it's definitely a major prove it year for him is actually more off the court stuff with the Celtics, right? They make it to the finals.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, right? They have this incredible turnaround season, one of the greatest turnaround seasons we've ever seen in professional sports, bar none. It's one of the best. There are a lot of people who think that one of the biggest reasons, if not the biggest reason they made it to the finals, was Jaylen Brown, who took them a lot of these, through some of these games where Jason Tatum was inconsistent and
Mm-hmm.
Jaylen Brown was very consistent in terms of his offensive output and especially his defensive, just ability. Like he was so good in
Yeah.
certain games. And this is where it gets to become a huge prove it year for Tatum. They try to trade, not Tatum. Tatum is untouchable. They try to trade Jaylen Brown for Kevin Durant. And I saw a ton of Celtics fans who were very salty about the fact that Jaylen Brown was instantly being, discussed as a trade piece after
Yeah.
this incredible turnaround season. And I think whether it's fair to Tatum or not, that is going to come down on Tatum.
Mm-hmm.
They do not want to trade Tatum because they think he's this guy that we're talking about, a borderline top 5, top 10 player.
Yeah.
That makes it a prove it year. They're not willing to trade you, but they're willing to trade this guy who is more consistent than you in the biggest games. And if he does not come out this season and prove to the NBA audience, but specifically I would say the Celtics audience, that he is the guy, it might
Mm-hmm.
be an ugly look for him. Like why are they trying to trade Jaylen Brown at every step of the way and not you? If you can't get consistent, if you can't be the guy for this team, why is it not you that's being talked about more often? So
Mm-hmm.
it's another thing that, just like Devin Booker, is it fair to him? Maybe not, but it does matter. It's a prove it year because it was not him on the block. It was Jaylen Brown.
Mm-hmm.
He he can't get outperformed by Jaylen Brown again in the playoffs. By no accounts, and this is not even a slight at Jaylen Brown. Jason Tatum is better than Jaylen Brown. We agree on that, right? No?
Jaylen Brown better than Jason
Jason
Tatum.
Tatum, Jason Tatum is better than Jaylen Brown. You and I agree on that, right? Like no
Yeah.
question, he's
Yeah.
better. The problem is, to the mass audience that watches some of these games, there was at least 5 games in the playoffs, just in the last 2 rounds of the playoffs last season, where if you were a casual fan, you would completely disagree with that statement. If you're a casual fan and you see Jaylen Brown, the guy that you just saw get, carry a team borderline in some games to the finals, and he's the one that gets traded, that raises a lot of eyebrows. So can't get outperformed by Jaylen Brown again. Just
Yeah.
can't.
And let's look at here, drunk. You have a couple of comments here, and then Sean will read yours as well. I'm so confused on Tatum because he shows up every big game up to the finals, then literally went ghost. I agree that this is a pretty year for Tatum. It's not even about winning the finals, but it's about going up like a dog, not a puppy. I hate the Celtics, but Tatum from my city, so I root for him. I'm telling y'all, these new superstars have live mental breakdowns when they shoot not when their shots not falling. Um,
Sure.
Drunk, Jaylen Brown really out the only Celtic out showing out in the finals. Tatum is a rare player than Jaylen Brown. We can get another Jaylen Brown, but we can't get another Tatum. And then Sean, you said if Brown could figure out how to dribble left, he could be better than Tatum. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
here's the thing that I will say.
He could be. He shouldn't be though.
I think that for Jason Tatum, the reason why I think that this is more of a prove year for me is I want to see that next evolution of his game. Again, coming from the 2017-18 season when he was just 19 years old, got us to the NBA Eastern Conference Finals. The reason why I think that this is more of a prove year for Jason Tatum, more so than I would say any other player, in my opinion, and maybe again, this might be Homer and this might be biased. The reason why I think it's the biggest is because when we look at a guy like Jason Tatum, everything was there for him. The whole situation was perfect. Everything lined up perfectly. And then as soon as it got to that game where we kind of lost it, I believe it was game 4 of the NBA Finals, if I'm not mistaken. That's where I
Yeah.
think it started tilting towards, okay, the Warriors are probably going to win this. Because, again, it was the shot selection, it was the IQ. I need all that stuff to go up a notch. I feel like there's too many times where I see these basketball players go with their trainers and they're doing these crazy moves that have no business being part of your bag. I look at Jason Tatum and I just think that there's the training that he does at times where I'm just wondering, yes, you could do that in a game, but for the last couple of years, especially in the bubble playoffs where I was the most disappointed in Tatum that I think I've ever been, it needed to be better. And again, I understand, from Jason Tatum, he needs to own up to that. I think that this needs to be a growth year for him, not even a prove it year. This has to be growth and prove it because I want Tatum to be a good player. I think he can be a good player. I think he can be a superstar in this league. The question for me now becomes, is the mental IQ there when a shot is maybe like, what Drunk was saying, maybe when a shot's not falling to not take that same exact shot every time. Or, hey,
Hmm.
I might have an open shot here, but let me quickly move the ball, get it to another teammate. Maybe they have a better look than I do, and then I'll get the ball back eventually. I just felt like at times, especially in the finals, I felt like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum got in their way. And again, it was kind of like a your turn, my turn type of thing that I've talked about in the years past with I can't remember which team it was. It might have been which team was it? It might have
Turn
been
my
like,
turn is always.
yeah, I think it might have been Durant and Westbrook or something like that. Or Harden
Yeah, I mean, I think the
and
all-time
Westbrook.
one is I think it's Wade and LeBron. Their first season in Miami is like the ultimate your turn, my turn. That was like such a bad
Yeah.
situation in the beginning.
And it just made us easier to guard. And so I don't necessarily want us to get rid of Brown in a sense where I think Brown could definitely be a player that's also in a prove it year as well, because I think that this playoffs also kind of exposed what he needs to work on as well as a contributing member to the Celtics. But again, that's just kind of my opinion on it. But yeah, we'll see what happens, man. I'm excited for the Celtics this year and see what we can do after what happened last year.
Yeah. Well, one last thing for Tatum too. Like as talented of a shooter as Jason Tatum is, he's a guy that like I when I watch him play, I sit there and I just pray that this dude would just dribble down the lane and dunk on people more often.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
just use your size. Like he is 6'8", 210, athletic as all hell. Like this dude could get any bucket he wanted down low if he went for it. He settles for shots maybe more than any player in the league right now in terms of taking these step back mid range, long threes. And he can do it, and that's the reason he gets away with it, right? The problem is he could be so much better if he supplemented his game with easy baskets, getting down into the lane and getting into the paint.
Mm-hmm.
And realistically too, this is a dude that should average way more free throws than 5. Like he should be able to get more free throws than that. And in the playoffs, I think it was about the same as it was in the regular season. I think he averaged like 5.5 free throws per game. I think he should have more than that. Realistically, he should have more. The problem is he's a little too skinny. Um,
Mm-hmm.
just in terms of like how he plays. Like he plays like a smaller dude than he is sometimes. So
Yeah.
I would love to see not only that playmaking take a step forward, but just his aggression towards getting to the basket, getting up towards the rim, and just like taking easy points. He makes himself take much harder shots than he needs to,
Mm-hmm.
maybe more than any player in the league. So I actually love Jason Tatum as a New York Knicks fan. I actually like long time hate Boston and all the Boston teams. Jason Tatum is somebody I actually can't help but root for. So I, he's a guy I totally agree with you. Like I want to see this guy take a step forward this year and just be the guy that by all accounts he is when it
Mm-hmm.
matters most. I think that would be huge.
Yeah, for sure.
I
And
got
people.
I got an
Oh no, go
no no
ahead.
no
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was gonna
No.
say I got another prove it guy.
All right, let's go
Somebody
with it.
that's closely tied to Jason Tatum. Can you guess who it is?
Is it Bradley Beal?
It is Bradley Beal. You
You
know me
think you
too
think
well.
you think it's a prove it year for him? Just with the big contract?
I think it's a prove it year in this sense, right? We've discussed this a lot, right? In terms of Bradley Beal and the contract situation, how much this
Hmm.
dude is getting paid now is mind blowing to me, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who would disagree with me, I would assume, but I think you and I are on the same board or same boat with this. There is no situation in which this guy is a number one on a winning team. There's not. We've never seen
Hmm.
it anything close to this guy being a leader of a winning team, right?
Yeah.
To be making as much money as he is and to be as non-committal to the future of the team in terms of, being there in the long term, because I know the contract suggests that, but I mean, there's no player that's been talked about more in terms of big trades than Bradley Beal in the last 3 seasons. So my logic is this, right? I am a firm believer that Bradley Beal took the contract because he is not going to get any more money anywhere else than he got with that deal, right? And he's
Right.
going to take his, 6 months of whatever still on the Washington Wizards, and if it
Hmm.
doesn't look great, he's going to request a trade, right? That is just the standard nowadays in terms of what these guys do to get to other teams. This
Hmm.
is my logic of why it's a prove it year. If any team is going to give up the assets that it will take to get Bradley Beal, but also more importantly, pay Bradley Beal the contract that Bradley Beal is on, he needs to show out in the beginning of this
Hmm.
season. He needs to. I think that contract is such a deterrent to him being traded if he continues to not necessarily lead to any major winning.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. I think there's a lot of teams that would look at that contract as big it is as big it is as it is. Excuse me, jeez, I couldn't even get that out. As big as it is right now, there's a lot of teams that are much less interested in taking that contract, I think, than they were 2 seasons ago. So if he wants to go somewhere else, if that was the major plan for him in terms of his camp getting this big contract, and then now I can go to the team I can win with, I think he has to prove it. I think there's a lot of teams that would say, no, thank you. We're not going to give up everything we have to pay you $55 million this season. Like, what are we going to do with that? You know?
Yeah. Let's see here.
His is
Drunk.
more simple than the other ones, though.
Yeah. Drunk said I disagree. Beal already proved that, and he can get a bag. I think like the thing I would say about that Drunk is that even though he did get a bag, and I think that a lot of people would say that. I think in terms of the reason why I would kind of somewhat agree with what Pete is saying here is because I think for me and I think for everybody else, they want to see Bradley Beal do it on a team where he could potentially be in a playoff contention spot. I think that I can't remember. I think maybe he's been to the playoffs since he was 20 years old. Um, the last time he went to the playoffs when he was like 27. I think he's like 30 now. Um, we want to continue to see him, prove it in that sense. I think a lot of people, again, you can talk about being satisfied with the money. You can talk about, having it just be a situation where they're happy with the money that they get, and that's really all they care about. But I think in order for Beal, and again, maybe it's a legacy thing. It might be a little bit corny thing to say. And again, there's people in this league that are about trying to get championships, trying to be the best player they can be, and then there's others that are kind of satisfied with the money. And again, I don't want to classify Beal in that sense, but with the contract that he signed and kind of not even the seriousness and then demanding that he wants it to be, I can't disagree with people saying that it's about the money for him. Because I talk about it all the time. Get your money. Players, get your money. I don't think anybody will disagree with that. But I think that for me, I would love to see Beal on a competitive team trying to get championships. But again, that's just kind of my personal preference.
Yeah. No, yeah. My thing with Beal, and this is the reason I name him, right? I'm kind of taking it under the precipice that he is definitely not going to be a long time Washington Wizard. Like I could be totally wrong. Maybe he is just happy. Maybe he's kind of in the Damian Lillard camp of like, I would rather be here, and if we end up winning here, it'll mean more, right? That's what Dame said, Maybe it's the same thing for Beal. Could very well be. I just don't think it is. I think this is a guy who wanted his contract, and now he can potentially shop himself out to whatever the highest bidder in terms of a super team in the making is, right? If that is the case, that is why I say it's a prove it year. If he's just staying with Washington and this is just what it is, definitely not a prove it year. He's already proved that he can be this guy, right? Put up 30 points on this team and be kind of a superstar, but like a B League superstar, like a team that's never going to compete in the playoffs, really. That's fine if that's what he wants to be. I just don't think that's what it is. So that's why I think it's a big prove it year in terms of you want to go to one of these major teams and they ship out a bunch of their young players and picks for you. It has to be a prove it year.
Definitely. It definitely has to be a prove it year. And let us know in the comment section down below who you guys think is in the biggest prove it year for an NBA player. Again, we talked about a lot of guys. I know that there's even more guys that we get to talk about. Zion could be in that category. Kawhi Leonard could be in that category.
We probably should have talked about Zion, but that's okay.
But let us know in the comment section down below who you guys think. Actually, you know what? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about these two guys. Really quick, Drunk, you said, who would you rather have right now, Bradley Beal or Donovan Mitchell?
Hey, that's a good question. I probably would take Donovan Mitchell just because he's younger, but I don't – that one's kind of tough.
I probably would take Beal. He's more consistent of a shooter.
You think so?
I think so.
Let's say on the contract they're on right now, if you're making the team, you're taking Beal over Donovan Mitchell?
I'm taking I mean, they both kind of
It's tough. It's tough because you have to weigh – you got to weigh that mega contract that Beal has. Like, that matters.
Yeah.
He is literally making you're a top 5 player in the NBA type money. That is what he is making.
Yeah, that's true.
It's tough.
That is tough. But let's move on to Zion Williamson. Again, Zion has been in the league now for 3 years. Obviously didn't play last year due to a foot injury. A lot of talks about him and what's been going on with his contract. He did sign the contract eventually. And then, it becomes this sort of situation where there's stipulations in his contract, the fat clause, if you will. He has to be a certain body fat percentage, has to be a certain weight. So, Pete, I want to ask you the question when it comes to Zion Williamson. Is this the biggest prove it year for Zion? Is he the biggest prove it NBA superstar this coming year?
Oh, man, that's a good question. On paper, yeah. I think on paper for sure he is, right? You get this mega contract and you've only played 85 games ever in your whole career. You have to be the biggest prove it, right? He has to be the only player in NBA. I don't know if this is true, but it has to be true. Is he the only guy that's ever gotten a max with less than 100 career games played?
Probably.
I mean, he has to be. That stat is just insane if you think about it. In 3 seasons, too. On paper, yes. He definitely is. Especially, and I think that it would be different if Pelicans hadn't played so good down the stretch last season. If they were still terrible, if this team was absolute dog water like they were in the beginning of last season, you'd still have to question, is he just actually is this just not the team for him, right? Does he just not want to be here, and is that why he's doing it, right? But now there's not really any more excuses. Like, this team is pretty talented. They have really good young players that can complement his play style. The question is, and this is really the thing with Zion, in those 85 games, he's a top 15 player already. I mean, he was so dominant in that stretch of Point Zion and the little ending of Stan Van Gundy's tenure as the head coach. He was so dominant. I think he was like 27, 7, and 7 or something like that. It was close to LeBron. Maybe not 7. It was 27, 7, and 3 or something like that with his assists. He was absolutely insanely just dominant in every facet of the game. So I think for him, the only real prove it is proving he can actually be healthy enough to be on the court. I don't even think it's a question of his talent. I don't know if people understand, this dude is a freak if he can stay on the court. He can do anything he wants to do with his body. So prove it in the health category. Prove that you can put the work in the off season to be healthy enough to come onto the court
Hmm.
and stay on the court.
For sure.
Yes. I just don't necessarily, and this is why I would say he's not my number one prove it. I would still say it's Anthony Davis, just in terms of how important Anthony Davis is to a team that needs to be good this year. I think it's
Hmm.
AD. Because when it comes down to it, the Pelicans aren't competing for the championship this season anyway, right? He just has to prove that he's worthy of this big contract in terms of
Hmm.
playing games. So,
Yeah.
yes, but no. That's my kind of complicated answer.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it has to be Zion Williamson. Again, signing the big contract. You're now officially the what's the right word I'm looking for? But you're the guy now. You are the guy on the Pelicans. Again, Brandon Ingram, great player, but continuously has always shown that he's probably a number two. Um, you got Alvarado, again, a really young, hungry point guard that found minutes as a rotation guy. I mean, the Pelicans have all the pieces, in my opinion, to be a young, up and coming, good young team. I mean, they have Willie Green as the coach. I mean, this team to me screams that they should be at least in the top seven, top six in the West. Again, it's a very competitive Western Conference. There's a lot of good players, there's a lot of good teams. But I think for the Pelicans to be where they need to be, I think Zion needs to take that next step forward. And I think he's probably the biggest prove it year, in my opinion. I can't see, again, Anthony Davis, yes, he's in a prove it year. Um, but I do think that when it comes to Zion Williamson, he's in the biggest one. And let me really quickly read the comments down below. You know who is in a sneak it prove it year? Jalen Brunson. Okay. Let me quickly talk about Jalen Brunson while Pete will be right back. Let's go with Brunson. This is, again, we look at a guy that has stats have improved each and every year since he's been at Dallas, got drafted by them. I think that they made a mistake in not trying to sign him again. The reason why I don't think that he's in a big prove it year, drunk, is because I don't think that the Knicks are going to be this good. They're not going to be good this season. I know that's probably going to upset Pete, but at the same time, when I think about this team, when I think about what they need to do to get better, I don't necessarily see that from the Knicks at this current point. And the reason why is because they're still looking for that number one guy. I know Pete talked about RJ Barrett and Sean brought it up in the comment section about how, uh, let's, is RJ Barrett a max guy and things like that. But I just don't see it, man. I don't see uh, RJ Barrett as the next, big thing in New York. I think that they're still looking for that superstar. I think that, Donovan Mitchell has been rumored to go there. I think that that's kind of where people are going to try to lean towards or try to go towards. Um, but at the same time, I don't think that Brunson necessarily has it. I mean, you could say it from this perspective, drunk. You could say it that because of the fact that he got a big contract, a lot of people thought that they overpaid for him. But I think that he could prove it to people. I know that there is question marks about, his size and, kind of what he brings to the game. But I see it from him, man. I know that maybe to some, he's not as big. He doesn't really create as much as they need to. But I think that I could potentially see that from there. Andrew Wiggin's going to get the max Wiggins style, probably. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. Again, we talked about it before in a different video, drunk. We talked about this from the Bradley Beal contract itself too. There is times, and especially in basketball, the sport allows big contracts to happen because of the fact that it's a soft salary cap. You have to pay players at a certain point a price, right? Or else you're going to get players on discounts. And players are not going to want to play for any discount, or they're going to try to want the money that they want.
I would assume, sorry to interrupt you, you're talking about Brunson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw that comment by Drunk in the chat saying it's a sneaky prove it year for Jalen. I would argue on like an individual city to city basis, just in terms of you have to prove it to the city you're in, he's probably number one. And that's just because the Knicks are a demanding fan base, right? Like the most demanding fan base. And there's a lot of people who have a lot of question marks of like, this is what this led up to, of we got this guy of all people. The toughest part with Brunson is it's again, In the words of the great Jalen Rose, okay? I love Jalen Rose. Shouts out, Jalen. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Expectations are a function, excuse me, realistic expectations are a function of happiness, right? If you have realistic expectations about what Jalen Brunson is, this will be a good season for you as a Knicks fan. Like, he is not a
Mm-hmm.
needle mover in terms of he's going to take you to the promised land. He is a glue piece for a team, right? And if that's the expectation, he should suffice pretty handily in terms of what this guy can do and bring to a team in terms of stability. But I do agree, just in terms of how unreasonable Knicks fans can be, and I will be the first one to admit, like, I'm a diehard Knicks fan. There is almost no fan base that is more unrealistic and unfair to the players on the team than the Knicks are. Um, yeah, Brunson is definitely up there. I mean, he is definitely up there.
Mm-hmm. Let's really quickly see here. Well, I'm saying he's got to prove it so he can be a starting point guard on a team.
True.
Yeah,
I mean, true. Even in that sense, because he hasn't been for a whole year. So yeah, you're not wrong.
yeah. And then a DeJounte Murray in a prove it year. I would say no because I think that they're still a piece away. I talked about this before
Oh,
with a couple of my friends. I think that they're a piece away.
I
But
think it is a prove it year for DeJounte too. I think
wow,
anybody, I think that anybody that goes for that much in a trade has to have expectations that are pretty high in terms of the city they're going to, in terms of where DeJounte, and this is the reason why I would say DeJounte's on a prove it year. I don't necessarily think it's to the same level as a lot of the guys we've talked about. Like, it's not even anywhere close to somebody like Zion or
mm-hmm.
Beal, in my opinion. Like, those guys are on a different level of how much they have to prove it compared to DeJounte. The one thing I would say for DeJounte that makes it a prove it year
Because he's a villain.
is, I mean, he could be, he's kind of has some villain energy coming into this season, and I'm here for it. I like it. I have been very big on DeJounte Murray for a long time. We've talked about this a few times on the channel. I have a video from probably like 2017 where I talked about guys I think that were the next up in the league, and he was one of my first people I picked. The thing with DeJounte is he's never really been on a super competitive team. And he was traded for with a package that would suggest this is a guy that is going to move the needle for you in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think he's capable of doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
my rationale of saying it's a prove it year is just a lot of people haven't seen DeJounte Murray play a lot just because he was on bad teams. Those Spurs teams were really bad for a few years there. Even last year they were really bad. So
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of you're on a big name team with big name players with high expectations, it has to be a prove it year. This is the first year that the casual fan is going to see you regularly. You have to show that it wasn't a fluke and it wasn't just empty stats on bad teams. I don't
Yeah.
think it was. I just think he definitely has to show he can do it. And
Mm-hmm.
realistically too, Trey already has Atlanta wrapped up. They love
Yeah.
they love Trey no matter what he does.
Mm-hmm.
The same isn't true for DeJounte. They don't have the history with him. He's not homegrown. He didn't get drafted there. So it has to be a prove it year. If they fall short of
Mm-hmm.
expectations, I guarantee you that Trey is not going to be the fall guy. The fall guy will be John Collins and DeJounte Murray. So got to be a prove it year just a little bit.
Let's see here. I love the Paulo beef, but I don't love him dribbling the ball off the 9 to 5 worker's head.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious to see. Again, we'll be live streaming the game tonight here on the channel. So if you are a fan of basketball, if you are excited about this game, come through to the channel, man. We're excited to have you guys over. And again, we're watching the game together. We're gonna try to figure out LeBron James and the super team. Apparently, Aaron Gordon's also going to be there. That's the big announcement from Jamal Crawford about an hour ago. You got Aaron Gordon joining it, so that'll be fun to kind of watch and see.
Aaron
Uh,
Gordon, oh my gosh, the city is going to shut down for AG.
Um, but I do think from this perspective as well, I think DeJounte, while I don't think it's a prove it year, I do think that he needs to ball out because I think from all the stuff that he's done this summer, the way that I think the Atlanta Hawks are trying to move forward in their progression of their timeline. Again, there goes that timeline. Take a sip of your tea or take a sip of whatever you have for timeline anytime it's mentioned here on the channel. I think that, you know, when it comes down to it, I like the idea of the Hawks excelling their timeline just a little bit, getting DeJounte Murray, who's around the same age as Trey, and really trying to, you know, the next step is to get that next piece. And I think that it could happen in the next offseason, depending on what goes on. The
Yeah,
game Drunk is going to be streamed on the NBA app or NBA.com.
yeah. Are you gonna be able to show it, or because it's on NBA, you won't be able to show it?
If it's on Twitter, I can show it, but if it's
You just show it regardless. Just see what happens.
yeah, Drunk, I will be showing it if it's available on the Twitter sphere, but if not, then I will be commentating on it. I'll
I know
just
you
gotta
just
watch
said
it.
it, but what time is it at? It's at 5.
It's at 5 on the West Coast, 8 on the East Coast, depending on where you live
Well,
at.
we'll see. If we'll see if I might hop in on like Discord on my phone, and then we can
Yeah,
chat
yeah,
for a little bit while the game's going on.
yeah, for sure, man.
One last thing for DeJounte too. You know, this is kind of a meme at this point, the beef with him and Paolo.
Mm-hmm.
If the first game comes by and the young Orlando Magic beat Atlanta, there will be so much smoke directed in DeJounte Murray's direction. Just telling you now. I don't want to predict the future. I don't.
But you're
They're
predicting the
both taking
future.
it seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, if it does happen in Orlando, as young and as bad as they've been for the last few seasons, if they beat Atlanta in that first game,
Mm-hmm.
there will be no amount of fun that will not be had at DeJounte Murray's expense. I'm just telling you that right now. People will make fun of him
Yeah,
until their eyes are bleeding.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily disagree.
It's just how it goes. That's how it goes. If you're going to talk a big game and, clown on dudes, you're inviting that if it doesn't go your way. That's just how the NBA works.
Definitely agree with that. And again, let us know in the comment section down below, who is your guys' biggest prove it year type of player. I would love to know your guys' opinions and comments in the comment section down below of this separate video, or if you're here on the live chat where we're talking about different topics, let us know in the comment section down below. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button if you're new to the channel. Again, all that stuff helps out the algorithm and lets people know that you mess up with this channel. And let's see here. Let's end this